So, participants, good morning, all of you. So, welcome to the third day on finite element analysis research perspective. So, today here we have with us Dr. Balaji PS, Assistant Professor of Mechanical Engineering from NIT Rourkela. So, he did his MTech from NIT Allahabad in machine design and PhD from Curtin University, Australia. And to his credit, he has a number of publications in various journals. He has completed one consultancy project, and he is currently three PhD students are currently working under him in various research areas. And, his expertise in machine dynamics and robotics, vibration control, non-linear vibrations, passive vibration devices, etc. And he got fully funded scholarship for a PhD from Ministry of Higher Education, Malaysian government. And he has various memberships in International Institute of Acoustics and Vibrations and ASME INEK. So now I request Dr. Balaji sir to address the gathering and present the today's session.
Yes, sir. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, now you can share the screen now.
Yes, sir. I'll start sharing the screen. Sir, is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, I will see first. Okay. I think I'm at my home, so so background is not so great. Okay, just for 1 minute, I'll switch on my video, then I can pass it out.
Okay.
Okay. So you can hear me, right? Video is clear.
Yes.
Screen is
clear.
Okay. Good morning, all of you. So I'm Dr. Balaji, and this is my second presentation with CVR. Let me just pass my video and continue with my audio. So, okay. So today's my topic is introduction to practical finite element analysis. So with respect to the theme of the short-term course, what is organized right now. So this particular topic will be explaining you on what basis you should select FEM over other methods, and in what basis you should do a particular analysis than other methods. Like when I start getting into the slides, you will more understand. When you talk about FEM, it's not that you can just simply take an FEM and do any analysis and you get the output and the output is fine. No, it's not the proper FEM. Proper FEM needs a proper input. The proper input gives the proper output. So now in this particular entire presentations, I'm not going to handle any mathematical calculations. I'm only making you, I only will make you understand what is FEM, what is the practical meaning of each and every item that is being used in the FEM. After understanding what is the meaning of it, then I will also let you know how to use it for your problem. Okay. So this particular presentations won't be like a more of a, what do you call, a mathematical formulations where I will start deriving my stiffness matrix, my mass matrix, and such kind of complications. I never added it here. So it will be straightforward one. And this particular content of it is also inspired. Many of the slides content is from web, because since I'm at my home, I could not make my slides. So I've taken some of the slides from web sources. However, the content is very much channelized to suit the theme of your short-term course. Anyway, let's go into the first slide. Okay, so what are the contents you are going to learn? See, we will be starting from how to solve an engineering problem, and then we will be going into FEM or FEA, FEM, and then numerical methods, and then the more importantly, discretization, degree of freedom. Can you see my mouse movement? The red dot, is it visible, sir?
No, sir.
No. Okay, I think, okay, very good. Anyway, when it comes, I will show you, sir. Okay, FEA, stiffness matrix, all the by the time you complete this particular presentation, you would have more of practical meaning rather than the mathematical understanding. Why? The practical meaning is very much needed. See, we in NIT, when we see any defense presentations of PhD students, especially in the field of design, of machine designs, especially, so definitely they would have used FEM. So this particular presentation is going to actually mold you in a way that what kind of questions we would ask in the defense. So the most of the questions when somebody take FEA will be covered in this particular slides. So more, in fact, in other manner, I can say that once you start understanding the slides, and you would able to answer them in your PhD defenses, because see, PhD is not about doing big things in a bigger manner. It is like doing a small things in a very detailed manner. So we will be targeting the basic fundamental knowledge of a students to make sure that whatever research he has done is actually enhanced his fundamental understanding. Because once he has strong base, then you can enhance his research in any high level. So our basic purpose is always to test the basic fundamentals. So these presentations, we will be actually showing you what are the basic fundamental questions we would ask to our PhD students when they come for their defense. And even for the comprehensive viva. So when they come for comprehensive viva, I guess you might know in PhD, you have to clear the comprehensive viva before starting into the research. So even in the comprehensive viva, we will be targeting the fundamental FEM. And again, once he has come to the end of his research, we'll be targeting how that fundamental is applied to his problem. So everything is related to this basic things that is covered in the slides. I believe that if you are in a research field with FEM, and these particular slides are so much useful to you. Okay, so now we are going to start with the engineering problem. See, in when I have an engineering problem, which means that I have to find a suitable output for my suitable input. Okay, for example, is it laser? It's my sketch visible, sir? What
No,
I'm
visible, sir. No, it's visible.
thank you. Okay. So now, for example, you don't worry about what is the boxes that has been shown here. Just focus on the cantilever. See, I assume that my engineering problem is to find the solution for this cantilever, that when I apply my force F, and this cantilever is going to deflect this, and I want to find my del. See, this is my engineering problem now. Okay, just focus on this particular region of this. So this is my input and this is my output. So once if I able to find my output del, then my problem is solved. So now, what are the various methods that are available to find this output is what we are going to cover in the slide. And moreover, this particular slide is very important from the research point of view. Why it is important? By end of this slide, you will understand yourself. First, let's see what are the various way we can do. For example, if I have a mathematical relation between F is equal to K del something, so then I can able to put my F and find my del. Assume this is just a random mathematical equation I have written. So there is a one way to find my output from input is by using a mathematical relation. The next method is I can directly take a cantilever of whatever dimension I need and then apply my force F, and then I will do the F versus del, which means that I can able to get my del for F. So this is like by doing experiments. So one is by using mathematical, the other one is by doing experiment. Okay. So by now you might be thinking, okay, in both the ways I could able to accomplish my del. So my problem is solved. So now if you see the boxes, there are three boxes are there. One box is called analytical, which is called a mathematical method. The other one is called numerical. Other one is called experimental. Okay. So analytical model is nothing but when you have a mathematical formula between output and input, and that particular formula can be used. And experimental is more about taking a cantilever and applying a force and finding your output del. Okay. Then where this numerical method fits? This must be your question. I have formula and I have an experiment. So where this fits? This will fit in the place where the mathematical formula is not available because the geometry is complex. Remember this, because the geometry is complex, you don't have the mathematical formula. Okay. And you don't have the facility to do the experiments, and that experiments are not possible or instead of possible, I should say feasible. Experiments are not feasible. And so due to the complexity in the problem, there is no simple mathematical formula is available. Due to the my physical limitations, I don't have the experimental setup to produce to do my experiment. So what is that way where I can achieve my result is called as numerical methods. Okay, so now there are three methods in which you can able to find my input to output. One is like analytical, numerical, and experimental. Okay, among these three methods, when you are trying to do a research work, what method should be taken first, what method should be taken next should be your prime question. Okay, in fact, when we are sitting for the defense, when somebody straight away starts with the numerical model, we'll definitely ask them the question, why you did not do experimental and why you did not do mathematical. And these particular questions we're not asking randomly, because there is a special sequence that is there which you should follow to go to your output. So among this 1 and 2 and 3, which one supposed to be your first preference? You see, if you want to understand which one should be first preference, you should see from the accuracy point of view. Okay, so now experimental is what is the output you need? You're directly asking the nature, right? You're directly going and doing the experiment, and nature is going to tell what is my output. So your problem is directly solved by the nature. So that's supposed to be your first preference of solving a problem. Remember that. You want to find output and experiment is possible within your limits, then forget about mathematical or numerical. You should straight away go for the experimental only. Done. Problem is solved. Now, due to some reasons, like you have to do so many samples. Okay, you have to find the solutions for so many samples. So in that case, if I go and do experiment again and again, then the cost of the experiment is very high, time consuming. Instead of that, if I have a formula between input and output, I can able to complete my results. So that is the time you have to come for analytical. You have to come for the analytical. So the first preference should be your experiments. Your second preference should be your analytical. Why analytical? Again, I told you, only when experiment is not feasible due to the reasons like you have too many samples or experiment is very costly. For example, I will give you one straightforward practical limitations why you cannot do experiment. If you're working on the nuclear bomb, assume you are making a nuclear bomb and you want to calculate how much people might die if I drop a bomb. In that case, you can never do the experimental because you cannot drop a bomb on a human and find out how many people can die, right? So in that case, if you have a mathematical formula to understand how much heat is spreaded due to the blast of the bomb and about the watt radius, then mathematically you can calculate, at least estimate. So that kind of practical limitation, analytical is fine. But analytical, the problem is it is only applicable when the problem is very simple. Like the geometries, like even if you take this cantilever, there are so many assumptions I'm making. That's the assumptions like uniform is cross section, means cross-sectional uniform, material is homogeneous, material is isotropic. So I'm imposing so much of the assumptions into my formulations. However, in reality, these assumptions are nowhere close to reality. Okay, they are completely away. So in that case, even if I use my formula and for that kind of realistic problems, my solution may not be feasible. So in that is the case, your third weapon when the analytical also failed is what you should come for numerical methods. So what you are doing a numerical method is you are approximating the solution within your reasonable accuracy to get your output. Okay, otherwise output is not possible. So to come to this particular slide, I'm going to sequentially tell you, if you are sitting on any presentations on any research topics, if somebody is presenting this particular their research, and then you are sitting, you please ask these following questions. Okay, so the first thing should be that the first preferential way to finish the experiment is do the output is experimental. So experimental is not possible, then analytical is not possible, numerical. So if somebody presenting a numerical, you should definitely ask him, because he has taken the least important one, that is third one. So you should ask him why experiment is not possible in your work. You should get the practical meaning. The meaning, The answer should not be like, I'm very lazy, I cannot do experiments, so I did numerical. No, that should not be the answer. Scientific work don't have any compromise. Okay, no compromise in scientific work. So if somebody says that experimental is not possible due to so and so scientific reason, that is acceptable. But if the reason is not scientifically correct now, then the work what is did should be discarded. Okay, because numerical is least important. So remember always, experimental should be the first one, analytical should be the second one, and numerical should be the least preferred method only when the first two fails. Okay, so now this particular thing FEA is comes under the numerical methods. Okay, so what are the various methods available? FEA is one such method. Do you think FEA is the only numerical method that is available? You might be questioning it. That is what we are going to answer in the next slide. What are the various methods? One of the, even still these are not the only four, so many are there. One is like a finite element method, boundary element method, finite volume method, and finite difference method. Like that, there are so many numerical methods are available. For all the structural problems, FEM is very good. For all the structural problems, FEM is very good. For all the fluid problems, FEM or FDM is very good. This FEM, this FDM is a basic fundamental of CFD. Fluid problem still works for FEM, but all the structural problem, FEM is very good. So what is this FEM and why it is very good for structural? So in order to understand this particular thing, you need to first understand the meaning of the word finite, element, and method. This particular meaning of this three word is covered in I think third or fourth slide from here. So at this particular slide, you can understand that this FEM or FEA, okay, we have, during our interviews, when people come for PhD, we used to trick them by asking what is the difference between FEM and FEA. Like FEM is like finite element method, the other one is called finite element analysis. So does like FEM, the other one is FEA. So practically both are used interchangeably. You can call something as FEM, you can call something as FEA. But we used to ask the students like, what is the difference between FEM and FEA? Okay, so let me actually going to give away the exact answer, so that when you come for NIT Rourkela interview and sitting in that place and ask this question is asked, you can tell with the proper answer. Okay, F is same for both the names. The only difference is in this M and in this A. M stands for method, A stands for analysis. Okay, so FEM refers to the method you have taken to solve the problem. Okay, so it means that if you are doing some analysis and somebody asking you what is the method you have taken to solve the problem, you should say I have taken FEM to solve the problem, finite element method to solve the problem. Okay, so remember this FEM word when you should use if somebody asking you, beta, what is the method you took to solve the problem? I took FEM. Okay, so what is FEA? What you did in the problem? I did finite element analysis. So analysis stands for, FEA stands for what you did. I did the analysis of these finite elements. Okay, so what is the method I followed? FEM, but what I did is finite element analysis. So FEM is a larger name. Under FEM, what I did is I did the analysis of my problem using finite element. Okay, so FEM and FEA, I have literally what you call cracked you the solutions. So I wish that if somebody comes for the PhD, every year we are asking. So far, I did not find any one candidate answering this particular question same. I have seen many people are saying both are same, but if both are same, then why you have to confuse with FE and FEM interchangeably? So this is what a exact difference between them. So what is the method I used? FEM. Under FEM, what did you do? I did analysis. So FEA. Okay. Okay. So now I have started from the place where I want to find my output, and then I came to the place where I'm going to follow my numerical methods, and then we went on to see what are the different types of numerical methods. And in that, we are going to focus right now from FEM. So you have to understand from larger scale how we have migrated into this FEM topic. Okay. And now before migrating into FEM topic, there are other numerical methods I have shown here. So you should practically think, does the other methods, so if I follow the other methods for solving a problem like a cantilever beam, can I see, when I say FEM is suitable for structural, that does not mean your boundary value, your finite volume, your finite difference are useless. They also, all the methods can be used for all the problems, but some specific methods are very much suitable. Okay, and here only you can understand what is the method. For example, because under numerical method there are so many methods are available, right? FEM is there, BEM is there, FEM is there, so FDM. So in this place, when we ask what is the numerical method you used, you don't say FEA, you say FEM. Okay. Okay. So next slide is going to tell you a comparison between applying the different methods on the same problem. Like, the answer is yes, you can use it, but the problem is accuracy and the programming is going to make the difference. So FA is quite useful if you're trying to solve the stress. FEM is your first preference. Okay, and I believe this particular thing is for FEA. So many of the people who are working in the field is working with respect to the stress. So when you come to stress, you can blindly take FEA and then FEM, and then you can solve the problem. Okay, so so now under FEM, what are the various product life cycle that is needed to be done, that we will be covering in the next slide. Okay, see, always this particular slide is actually decoding the real research steps that we take to solve an engineering problem. For example, I will like to share you one particular example where we are right now currently working. In my previous talk also, I have referred this particular project. That project is about designing an unmanned aerial vehicle, which is an armed vehicle. Okay, the target is that the vehicle should carry 20 kg of payload. The payload is BrahMos, the BrahMos missile, and it has to go to enemy territory, and it has to deploy the bomb, and it has to come back. The first requirement. The second requirement is such UAV should be dismantleable and assembled manner. So we should be able to dismantle the UAV like 4 or 5 parts. They should be carried with the shoulders, then go to the field of army, due to the war field, quickly assemble them and quickly launch them, and it goes bombs and comebacks. They want the vertical takeoff of the UAV, but it should also go forward and you should drop it. So if this is a very complicated requirements given by the Indian Army to start the work. So what is the product specifications they have told, right? It has to go to enemy territory, drop it. It has to vertically take off. Why it has to vertically take off? Because the war fields don't have any runways. They will go to deep forest, which is very close to enemy territory, and then they assemble it. So they will make it fly. So they want a vertical takeoff, because vertical takeoff don't need a runway. So these are the product specifications that has been given by our customer, like the client is Indian Army. Then based on all the product specifications, we did a conceptual design. Okay, so this is actually an unmanned vehicle, so there is no need to think about ergonomics or aesthetics. So in terms of commercial vehicles like car or bike, the people are more interested to see the ergonomics and aesthetics also. But with respect to our field, we are not worried about this ergonomics and aesthetics. So once the conceptual design is done, then we went on to check with the MIL. For example, all military design having a MIL standards, okay, MIL, and it is having some code here. So every design that you do for a military should follow this code. Okay, so after making the design, we are checking with the code, and after implementing the code in the conceptual design, we are making a detailed design. So now the design is done. So now what happens is prototype development is occurring, and after prototype testing is there, then simulation. But here I would like to slightly change the concept of the flow. What I will do is, after the standards, I can straight away go for a numerical simulations also to get my outputs from the numerical design, so that I can know that my design is safe. And once the final design is finalized, I can still go to my prototype development and test it. However, the flow that is given is a generalized flow. You can zigzag it in whatever manner you need. Finally, you come to design for manufacturing, then design for assembly, and final drafting is for manufacturing drawings. So this is a complete product life cycle of any commercial product. So here where the FEM fits, the FEM fits here, simulation place. What would happen if this box is not there? Okay, let's assume what happened, this box is not there. So what happens is, once you come a design, you'll develop a prototype and you'll test. I assume that prototype fails. Testing the prototype is fails. What you will do? You will again go to prototype development. Again, you do the test. Again, test fails. Again, you go to prototype development and do the test. So prototype development means what? A real-time fabrication of a component, which means that it is going to take two things. It's going to take time and it's going to take money. So much of time and money is wasted in testing. So by including this FEM, you can even build a complete aircraft part by part while sitting at your home in the comfort of your AC and need not to worry about even the weather, what is outside. But if you're going to do for testing, you have to find the manufacturer, you have to find the lots of money. In fact, while doing FEM, you can simply change the material. For example, I took a cantilever and I did analysis like F and del, and assume I took material is aluminum. But again, I'm thinking, no, I want to change to steel and see what happens. So simply go to material property, change the metal to aluminum to steel, or you can again get what is a new del. But what is happening is, if you are trying to do for a experimentally, again you have to go to manufacturer, again find the new material, again to fabricate it, again come and test. It never happens that much short period of time. So FEM is going to save you lot of money and time. And believe me, in industry, if these two parameters you can have with you, you can reduce a lot of money and reduce a lot of time. You are the most wanted person in any industries in the design field. Okay, so now after getting into the importance of FEA, now we are going to understand the each and every term in the name: finite element analysis or method. Okay, that's what we are going to see. So far we only established FEM, how much important is to us. Okay, so now what is this slide? The slide is going to explain you what is this FEM. F is like stands for finite, E stands for element, and M stands for method. So in addition to what is already given, I'm going to straight away start with the one particular example to make you understand, because the word F is very critical. That is called finite, and we are going to understand why this F has come actually here, and we are also going to see what this E is actually doing here, because it's not some random day somebody was doing some analysis and he thought, okay, chalo, let's name it in a very fancy manner, and he tried 2-3 names and he made FEM because it's very fancy to tell. No, it's not that way they made it. They did some scientific approach to name it, and that scientific approach, you may not get this particular explanation from anywhere in any textbooks. So please, you can have a close observation of this example to understand why this FEM is there. Okay, let's take a circle. What is the area of circle? I know it's pi r square, but for time being, you understand that we don't know this formula. I don't know this formula, but still I want to find the area of circle. I know r, then I will then I use pi r square, but not r square here. It is only r. Okay, so if I know r and pi, I can know area, but assume that I don't know the formula. So my aim is to find my output. Output is my area. So what are the various methods? One good thing is, I assume that I know the area of a square, which is a into a, or I know area of a triangle, which is half. Okay, half into length into height. So that I know, like half a square, like because both are a. So assume I know the area of square or triangle, but I don't know area of circle. So a common sense should tell you, I divide the area, divide the circle into small squares and calculate number of square and the area. For example, I take my circle, then I put my squares here. Okay, I'll put my squares here. I'll put my squares. So now you calculate number of complete square, because you see which is coming in the circle now, which the end of the circle is not proper square. So you should only take the square which are perfectly square. Okay, so perfect square. So it is like number of square into cross section of each square. So that is equal to area of circle. Number of squares. Like for example, if I have fit 100, so 100 into 8. So now what happened? Because you see which are at the corner, I'm not going to count because they are not perfect squares. Okay, I'm going to take only squares which are squares. So how to improve the accuracy? You reduce the size of the squares. Okay, you reduce the size of the squares. So then what happens? Near to the boundary also you are able to cover the properly. Okay, near to boundary also you are able to cover the squares very, fit the squares very properly. So by reducing the size of the squares, minute and the minute and minute, and then calculating number of square into each square area, I should not say cross section, I should say the area of squares, then you will get AO. So the more and more smaller and the smaller squares you make, the area of the circle is going to get so much accurate. So in order, so I can say like this: size of the square is less, area of circle, sorry, slight mistake, area of circle accuracy is very high. But when I decrease the size, what happens to number of squares? Number of square is also high. So technically, when the accuracy is 100%, the number of squares in the circle is so small, like a dot. And in that case, the number of squares would become infinite, right? So when I put infinite number of squares, then I calculate the area, and then it becomes 100% accurate. But now, physically, you can understand the accuracy can become 100%. But let's see practically what is going to occur. That means mathematically. So the number of square become infinite, right? The area of square is whatever area. So what, something into infinite is actually answer is infinite. Array, I supposed to get the area of circle as assume 100 meter square. Okay, but actually what is the answer I got? Infinite. Why I got infinite? Because the number of squares are infinite into area of square is small. So something into infinite is infinite. So you might be thinking, by dividing the circle into smaller elements whose area I know, then I should get closer and closer to 100. But what happened is, completely when you try to force yourself to get 100% accuracy, actually you've been thrown out of your proportion and put into infinite, which is no use for you. You need to know what is the area of circle, which is 100 meters square supposed to get, but you got the value of infinite. So in this one, you might have understood one thing. So if I want to actually find my area of circle, then this should not be infinite. This should be some finite value. And this should be some finite square area, so that I can get area at least close to 98 meters square. Because I won't get 100 because I'm not putting that small area, right? I will get as close as 100, which may be 98. So the one key factor is the element what I used. The element I used is square, so that I'm going to call it as element. Okay, so how many elements I used? I used finite number of elements. So that is what this F stands for. So finite element I used, and the method I made this method, so it's called finite element method. Okay, so it is not infinite element, it's not IFEM. Okay, it is actually FEM. So this is why FEM is called as FEM, because by going into more number of elements further and further, you actually spoiling the solution which is supposed to be avoided. Okay, so this is what FEM is all about and why the name has come. Okay, so now what is more important here is element. So now we are going to understand what is element and how it is used in the problem, that we'll be seeing in the next slide. Okay, so discretization. Discretization means, assume this is the object. So dividing the unknown object using the known elements. For example, I know triangular element, so dividing this particular object into the known element is what we called as discretization. Okay, discretization is meshing. So why I'm doing the meshing is because the object is of complex area whose mathematical formulations I don't know. All I know is the mathematical formulations of the known shape. So I'm dividing the complex geometry into a known shape, and that's how an object is undergone a process called discretization. Okay, so the where, so each element is having a nodes. Okay, so this is like element 1, element 2, element 3, and the corner points are called as nodes. So now you should physically understand what is the purpose of discretization is to divide the complex area into a known elements whose mathematical formulations I know. Okay, so that's the main purpose of discretization. So now in FEM, assume if you don't discretize the element properly. Okay, for example, instead of triangular element, assume there is also another element called square. Okay, quad element, that is called a square. So if I use a quad element to solve this trapezoid problem, and let's see whether how much area I can exactly cover. So assume now area of triangle 1, 2, 3 is area of a trapezoid. But if I have quad element is what, like a square. Okay, quad is square or rectangular. So if I try to make it like a rectangle, so you can understand that if I put one rectangle here, this two triangle goes out of my proportion. So I'll put one more rectangle here, but still this is going to go out of proportion. So now you have to keep putting so much of rectangle, and it is always best not to mix the type of element. Okay, one element you pick, complete material or complete shape should go into discretization using the same element. So now you see these corners are not properly covered by the quad element. Okay, so selecting what is the type of element is also a very key to a problem. So discretization is very important one. If you wrongly use the wrong elements, then the shape of the elements are not properly covered, which will give you larger error in your calculation. Okay, so what is the discretization, why it has done, I have told you. So now let's go into the next slide, that is called degree of freedom. See, these are called as nodes. These are called as nodes. That means the junction point of these elements. So does this node have any significant in the calculation? Yes, nodes are very big significant in the calculation, and then we will see what it is. So each node has something called as degree of freedom. Okay, what is this degree of freedom? The degree of freedom is nothing but the minimum number of parameters required to define the position or state of any entity completely in space. For example, if you take a simple points, if I give you its x and y, then exactly you can also, for example, there is a graph, okay, x and y, and I put a point here. How to make sure that you also put the same point in your paper is by giving you the distance of x and y. So you also put the point and the same. So now this is actually having a 2 degree of freedom, like x and y is required. And if it is a line, then I can give you the x, y, and the angle. Then you can able to draw the line. So if it is a point, then it needs 2. If there is a line, then you need a 3. So if it is a line in the 3D space, then I need to tell what is x, y, and z, and angle at x, theta, y, and theta, z. Okay. So now the total number of independent coordinates required to define the element is called as degrees of freedom. So degrees of freedom, how it is going to useful to me? First, you should think. You see, every element now having its own what you call its ability to solve the problem. It's not that you take any random element, you solve the problem. Every element is been, for example, there are elements called as a bar element, okay, and beam element. Each element is having its own degree of freedom. So you should first understand what is the degree of freedom of each element before solving a problem, and we will be covering it up in the coming slide, so you don't have to worry. Now let's see about nodes. So once we know what is the degree of freedom, let's see about nodes in the next slide. Okay, so the element can be one dimensional, two dimensional, and three dimensional. Okay, so what is this 1D element, 2D element, 3D element? It's like if you make the complete model, three-dimensional model, then you will be using a three-dimensional element. For example, I am going to solve a cube. Okay, so cube. So then I have to discretize this using a three-dimensional element. Then if I'm going to solve a square, that is then I'll discretize using a 2D element. Then if I'm going to discretize using if I'm going to solve a line, then I'll be using a 1D element. So element means how many dimensions it needed to define the shape is called as the dimensions. Now the question is, I started from experimental, analytical, then I came to FEM, means numerical. In numerical, I came to FEM because my problem is structural. So under FEM, now I have to discretize. Now again, discretization, I have options called using 1D, 2D, and 3D. So now among these three, which one supposed to be more useful is 3D. Okay, if possible, you should always use a three-dimensional FEM. But the problem is three-dimensional FEM is having some limitations. Why? Because the number of elements are more. Okay, the number of elements and number of nodes are more, and the amount of time it takes to solve the problem is very high. So always you should try to minimize to the lower dimensions. From 3D, you should try to solve it in a 2D. But the problem is, it's not that blindly you take a problem and simply make it into a 2D. There should be some specific criteria that has to be met in order to convert a 3D into a 2D. If the criteria what I'm going to tell you does not meet to your problem, then you have no other choice other than doing a three-dimensional analysis only. So what are the criteria? Let me show you. Okay. And number one, so in case somebody solved a two-dimensional research, we will catch them by asking what is the criteria they followed. So literally this particular slide is also going to crack you the solutions for those questions. Number one, the problem can be converted into a plane stress, or the problem can be converted into a plane strain. So this plane stress and plane strain means a three-dimensional stress, okay, is converted into a two-dimensional plane, either plane stress or plane strain. Or third criteria is axisymmetric problems. So a three-dimensional can be converted into 2D only if it fits into any of these criteria. If any of the three criteria are not fit, then you should not go to a 2D, you should solve it only in a 3D only. So now how to think about plane stress, how to think about plane strain, let's not worry too much, but I can tell you a general understanding of it. Plane stress, you can go for a thin ones. Plane strain, you can go for a thick one. Axisymmetry, which are very circular. Okay, axisymmetry means that are very much circular, like cylinder. So if your body is thick, plane strain can be preferred. If body is thin, you can go for plane stress. But thickness is not the only criteria to go for the analysis. You should also see how the loading is occurring. Loading should be always in plane. Okay, if you have out of plane loading on a thin material, you have no other choice other than going for a 3D. If you have a in plane thin, then 2D is possible. In plane thick, 2D is possible. In plane axisymmetric, then 2D is possible. But out of plane, then you have to go only for 3D. So after coming to 3D, now converted that 3D to 2D. And what is there any way to convert 2D into 1D? Literally all the stress calculations cannot be converted into 1D. You have to follow only 2D. But if you are going for a elongation, okay, elongation means bar, like there is a material you are going to elongate, so then it is going to deform into a del. Such elongation can be converted into a 2D element where the deformation is occurring along the length of a material, along only one dimension. For example, if I take a beam, okay, so if I apply a bending, so it is going to bend and extend. So what is happening? It is having a elongation along X and elongation along Y. So in that case, it cannot be converted into 1D. it has to be solved in the 2D only, and that too if it is a thin or thick or in plane. Okay, so let me make the things very clear. Means I will also write properly now because I use these things. Okay, so let me give you a value. So number one, if it is a plane stress, that is for a thin ones. Second one is like a plane strain for a thick one, and third is axis symmetric. Okay, so all the things should have a in plane loading. So before converting an 3D into a 2D or 2D into 1D, you please understand this all the conditions and solve it. Okay, now if a problem can be converted to 2D, but still I am following 3D, is it okay? So you should be thinking, chalo, I have a big computer, supercomputer, I can do it. So the answer is yes. Always you need not to reduce the dimensions of a system. You can solve 3D as it is only. So only when there is a limitation in terms of the computer. For example, my computer which is available in our computing lab, right? So the computer that is used by our students is having a 64 GB RAM. Remember, 64 GB RAM. It is having 4 GB graphics card. It is having a 1 TB SSD. Okay, and the processor is like a 3.5 gigahertz, and they are like Intel Platinum, means Intel i7 with the 11th generation. So all are so high level, the latest versions, but still we could not solve all the 3D problems. We always convert the 3D to 2D. And let me tell you, we have a server whose RAM is 256 GB RAM. RAM is 256 GB RAM. Okay, we only know 8 GB RAM, 16 GB RAM in your computer, 32 GB RAM, but the RAM is 256 GB RAM. Hard disk is like 10 TB SSD. In that scale, 3D can be solved very easily, but we may not have that facility with us. So we always, by the computers used by my PhD students, as their desktop is only having 64 GB RAM, so they cannot go for such complicated analysis. So I always push them to convert a 3D into a 2D. And I will tell you one more simple example. We try to solve in a server of 256 GB RAM. Okay, 256 GB RAM. We did a model analysis of our UAV, complete UAV in 3-dimensional. Okay, it took 12 hours to get our solution. So it's like this, at the night we will make the model, we will switch on the computer, then we go for sleep. Next day morning we woke up to get the result. That is in 256 GB computer. Now you can assume in 256 GB computer takes 12 hours. Let's for time being and assume that it is linearly related. So then I'm going for like 128 should take 24 hours. Of course, it's not so linearly like this, but just to get the feel of the magnitude, why you need to reduce the problem, we are seeing. Okay, then 64 should take like double now. So like 48, because I'm reducing by half now. So 32 GB should get 96 hours. Then 16 GB should get like, so you see the 48 hours is 2 days. Okay, 24 hours is 1 day, 12 hours is half day. So by reducing the RAM smaller and smaller, the number of days to solve the problem is bigger. So with the 64 GB RAM, the problem might take 2 days to solve, but with the 256 GB RAM, problem took only 12 days. Okay, although problems are not so linearly related like this, I'm giving you a scale to understand how decrease in RAM is going to increase your number of working hours. Okay, so now the another big problem in India is power cut. In this 48 hours, if there is 1 second power cut also, all your 48 hours is gone. Like 48 hours, 58 minutes, and last one power cut was there, then all the 48 hours of life is gone. So you need to also make sure the number of time taken is very less, because the less electricity is consumed, there is less risk of power cut, and you'll get the result very quickly. So, and if you want to know chalo, I want to change my design and see what happens to it, then you again have to wait 2 days to know the result. Like a test match, we always interested in 2020, right? You start a match, finished in 3 hours and tell who won. Test match is like you have to wait till 5 days to know who won. So we don't want to go in that kind of long period of time to waste, right? So we are always more interested to get our results very shortly. So in that cases, number of elements, all the things, all the dimensional things are coming into play. Okay, so now I have told you more practical meaning of what is the FEM and how elements are selected, and how the converting from 3D to 2D is going to affect your problem. I have actually told you. So this is only by RAM. Okay, now I will also add this all is in 3D. So now if you have a 64 GB RAM, so then if you take 3D, then it's going to take 48 hours. So then if my RAM is less, then I can convert 3D to a 2D. So now it might not take 48 hours, it might take very less hours. I will give you a scalable value also to make you understand. See, in my 68 GB, 64 GB, we did one simulations. Okay, that took 3 hours. Okay, what I told is it took 3 hours to do a simulation, but I converted the 3D into a 2D. Then I ran it. It only took 10 minutes. I'm repeating, 64 GB RAM. I did a 3-dimensional analysis. It took 3 hours, but I converted the 3D into a 2D by proper logic, and it took only 10 minutes. Now you see, when there is a less RAM, then I have to go for a less dimensions ones. Okay. So this one might have given you a inside details of how we do research and how do we select our problems to solve within the facilities what we have. Okay. So now there is also one more way to solve a problem in FEM, and that's what we are going to see that one in the next one. That is called as interpolation function. Many times in our interviews, we ask what is the interpolation function, what is a shape function, why it is used, and people can tell the definition, but people could not tell what is the meaning of it. And today again I'm going to decode this particular practical meaning of this word interpolation. Okay, what is this interpolation? Say, assume I took a cantilever. Okay, my cantilever did not come straight, so let me make a very straight cantilever. Okay, so I have divided the cantilever into elements. In fact, once you start understanding the term interpolation, okay, or shape functions, you might feel FEM is actually a cheating problem. Means you are doing a cheating in the sense that you only assume how the solution is, that solution is occurring, and then you are trying to get the solution. You would never get the feel of solving a problem as it is. Actually, shape function is very important, because if the solution is actually non-linear in reality, but you are taking a linear path, linear shape function, then the solution is nowhere related to the reality at all. We will get to know what is this both here. See, shape function is, okay, between these nodes. For example, if my cantilever is bending, okay, this is my y coordinates and this is my x coordinates. So this is the vertical displacement y. So now shape function is assuming between these two nodes how my displacement is going to vary. So if I assume between this node my displacement is linear, then I'm going to do like this. Okay, then what I will do, a linear line will be drawn between these two nodes to get our deflection. Or you can assume between these two nodes my displacement is non-linearly varying, that is quadratic. Then you will be connecting them with the quadratic curves. Okay, then connecting them with the quadratic curves. So now the important thing is, between these two nodes, how the solution is occurring, you really don't know. It is your assumptions that is done by shape function. So by using a shape functions, you are only understanding or assuming how the how the output is varying between the two nodes. See, wherever you have nodes, you will get a result. But when there is no node, you need to assume how the solution is going to vary so that you can interpolate the values at any point in between the nodes. For example, at this point, there is no node. I want to know the deflection value. Then I'll use a shape function to do interpolation. So what is the shape function is? Again, let me tell you. So it is like you're understanding how the parameter is varying between the unknown region, that is between the two nodes, that can be linear or quadratic. And again, by assuming the problem is like linear, okay, then you are solving the problem in a much simpler manner. By assuming the problem is quadratic, then you are increasing the complexity of your problem. So the complexity can be reduced if by assuming that function is a linear function. Okay, but again, the problem is if you assume linear function, the 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 scientific understanding or the solution becomes highly questionable. So you should not use a linear for a quadratic value. So you should definitely go for a quadratic interpolation functions. Okay, so shape function is very much important to a problem. I'm again repeating, when somebody asks you what is shape function, the shape function you can tell like between the two nodes how my output parameter is going to vary. I'm going to assume it can be quadratic, linear, cubic, higher order, whatever order it is. Okay, so higher the order you select between the nodes, that much accurate result you are going to get. That is so much related with the reality. Okay, here I'm going to come up with one particular questions. I will also try to answer myself, because we are reviewing so many research papers, and this is like one particular loophole we used to look for it. Okay, so remember, analytical problems are 100% accurate. Experimental problems, if there is no human error, that is also 100% accurate. But a numerical problem is how much percent accurate, because numerical problems are approximate solution. So in that approximate solution, can you get 100% accurate? So that should be your thinking. So numerical problems are, we have asked even the questions like, can you get 100% accurate results in numerical methods? The answer is big no. If somebody get 100% accurate result in numericals, I tell you, world will never do experiment, world will not develop mathematical model. They always follow numerical methods to solve all the problems in the world. But the reality is the percentage is never been 100. So how much higher it is? Like, is it 98 or is it 95 or 94 or at least 85 or 70? What is the highest accuracy you can obtain in the numerical method? Yes, there is a value. Of course, not still a finite value. So 95% accuracy is what you can get maximum with the numerical methods. If somebody is making 100% accurate numerical model, that's completely out of this natural world. Will definitely look, I'll be more interested to have 100% accurate numerical method, but it's not. Okay, why it's not? I will tell you a simple example. Let me go back, then I will tell you why, then I'll come back to this slide. Simple example is, I'm going to take another 15 minutes to complete my slide, so I'm not in a very late or not in a very fast manner. Assume let's take an example of this trapezoid only, and I'm going to see, for this kind of linear problems, the solution cannot be understood very easily. Assume that my problem is complex, like the circle. Okay, so now I have to find the area of circle. So I will be dividing this into small areas. I'll be dividing into small areas, right? So now when I am dividing the areas into smaller and smaller and smaller, still I'm going to miss out the curve regions, definitely. So you cannot go so small, and by going so small, your number of elements and computation time is increasing. So you'll stop at some place you have to stop the number of element at some place. So even at whatever place you stop, you are not going to cover the complete circle at all. So in all the cases, you are not going to get 100% accurate results. You will be getting only 95% accurate results. And I will try to cover this particular concept in other coming slides also. So now let's go into the next one, that is like type of elements. Okay, so like elements can be 1D, 2D, 3D, and like elements are line, bar, beam, all like 1D element, quad, tria, all like 3D elements. So all the elements types are here. I can able to share you this particular slide so you can have a very good look of it. Again, I'm telling you, selecting the element for a particular problem is so important, and selecting the dimension of the element is so important in terms of computational time. So in terms of accuracy of the problem, element type is very important. In terms of computational type, dimension of the element is very important. If you wrongly take dimension of the element, the maximum thing you are going to get face is a computational time. It might take longer time. But in the beam problem, if you take a rod or bar, your problem is gone. Okay, because each element is designed to accomplish a particular task. Beam element is designed to replicate the nature of the beam. Bar element is designed to replicate nature of the bar, and rod element is designed to replicate nature of the rod. So so the elements are very much important to be done. And now there is also one particular way to select, to know how the decide the element type. And now this one I've actually already told you: project time, shape and geometry, like type of analysis and material. The type of analysis we'll be covering in the next slide. And geometry, shape and size. For example, if you have a trapezoid, I told you, you select the triangular element so you can completely cover the shape. If you take a trapezoid and try to cover using quad, I told you already, like if you have a trapezoid and try to cover it with a quad is like a square, so you cannot cover completely, right? So always there is some space that is not missing. So element shape and size is very important. Computational time, like a 2D, 3D, how much time you want to finish it. So all these things comes into the element time. So when we see a particular PhD FEM thesis, we'll definitely ask you, beta, how do you select your element? Can you please discuss the details? So we only look forward to make a scientific judgment whether he has come into proper conclusion of what element he has taken. If he cannot give, and I'm telling you one particular example in Curtin University, where one of the students' PhD thesis got extended by my simple question. Okay, I asked a question to a PhD defense, and his complete PhD got extended by 6 months. And what is the question I asked? I will tell you. You can easily understand so that you don't repeat such mistakes when you are doing your research. The question is like this: the student has solved a blood flow problem. Okay, this is a blood vessels. This is the blood vessel, and the blood is flowing inside the blood vessel. So when there is a high pressure, the blood vessel might elongate. When the pressure of the blood is very high, it is going to elongate. So he wants to know what is the rupture that is going to create, means at what pressure of the blood there is a rupture that will be created in the blood vessel. He wants to learn. So but when he's trying to solve this simulation, he kept a free boundary condition at both the ends. So when he does a free boundary condition at both the ends, what happens is that the blood enters and the blood leaves without pressurizing the walls, because both the sides are open, right? It comes and goes. So only the pressure on the wall can be felt if there is a if at least one side is closed, right? So he has solved the problem by keeping both the ends are open. So I asked the question: if both the ends are open, the blood is going to come and flow without applying much of the wall. So what happens? So how to simulate it? And he could not give a proper explanation. And the chairperson is actually told him to redo all the analysis by changing the boundary condition, because the boundary condition he has taken was not so practical. It's completely different from the reality. See, this simulation he did some 3-4 years before, which at the starting of his PhD. But that is the fundamental analysis using which he has done all his further simulations, but the boundary condition and the type of element he used in the fundamental simulation is not as per the realistic condition, or he could not give any scientific judgment. They told him to repeat his entire PhD work by following the proper conditions. So a selection of element is so important in that manner along with boundary conditions. Okay. So now you can see this one I have told you already. A circle by having a number of sides, you can see here, by increasing the number of elements and the element size, now the shape of the geometry can be properly fit here. You can see, let me erase this become, you see here there is a space here, the curve regions are not properly made, and still curve regions are not properly made, and some curved regions are made. So if the geometry is very much complex, you have no other options other than reducing the element size along those complex geometries. And now we also did an industry simulation. In industry, we follow one particular standard. The standard is, before doing any simulation, you should remove all its fillets. For example, what is a fillet? Fillet is when you have a sharp corner, then you want to remove the sharp corners, you put a fillet, right? So the sharp corners, what you have here becomes like a non-sharp corners. So that before doing any finite element simulation, all non-essential fillets has to be removed. Why? Because if the fillets are not there, the corner is very sharp, the elements can exactly fit. But if there is a fillet, in order to cover the curve region, we have to put smaller elements that going to increase number of accuracy, means number of elements, right? So always they will remove the fillets on non-essential places. But if you take a case of the place where it is here, a fillet is needed, because there are places where fillet cannot be removed. Where the fillet cannot be removed, I'll give you one more example. Assume this is the cantilever. Okay, this is the cantilever. Assume there is a fillet in the edge of the cantilever. So in this case, you cannot remove the fillet, because the fillet plays a major role, because by putting a fillet, the amount of stress can be less. But assume there is a fillet in the end here also. There is smooth curve here. This fillet can be removed, but this fillet cannot be removed. So whichever fillet that can be removed, right, that will be removed. Whichever cannot be removed, that has to be kept to reduce the number of element size thing, number of what do you call elements, to reduce the accuracy of the problem. Okay, so now the entire FEM, it acts on one particular thing, that is about finding the stiffness matrix of the problem. Okay, so we saw how the meshing is done, and now the solution of the problem is occurring how. So far we only discussing about how to discretize the body, what kind of element to be used, how scientific judgment has to be done. So once after doing all the initial judgments, how the problem is going to be solved is by following a simple equation called F equal to Kx. Okay, here they put D, displacement. This is the final formula that is being used. So here the main point is how to derive your stiffness equation is what comes into a big challenge. Okay, once if you can able to this particular topic, what I'm going to cover next slide is not so much important if you are using an ANSYS or Abacus kind of software, but in research we always prefer to make our own coding, which means that we don't allow our student to follow commercial codes. So when you don't make commercial codes, you should know after making the element how the problem is solved. The problem is solved by developing a stiffness matrix and displacement matrix. So the stiffness matrix is very key, because stiffness matrix depend upon the number of type of element and degree of freedom. So now what are the methods that are available? Let's also see that. Of course, we're not going to see each and every. So there are three methods that are there. There is a direct method, variational method, and weighted residual. Direct method is very simple and we don't use it actually. For our research, my research, I always go for weighted residual. Like Galerichen's method is there. You can search Galerichen's method. I always follow Galerichen's method. Like variational method is like by finding the difference between potential and kinetic energy, like Lagrangian equations. Variational method is like useful that. So you can see direct method is easy to understand but difficult for programming. Variational and weighted residuals are difficult to understand but easy for programming. And all the commercial codes uses either variational or weighted. My problems are always solved by weighted residual method. So now type of method is also so much important. Okay, so I have also given you another 5 minutes. I'll finish this. So I have also given you one slide of how the direct method is useful. It is very easy to understand from the slides, so don't worry about how it is done. So for example, you see this is your F, this is your K, and this is your D. So this K matrix derivation is what given in this slide. You can understand how direct methods can be useful. So now the more importantly is, in any FEM process, we saw, right, simulation, CAE. Under that, there actually three subdivisions are there. One is called pre-processing, the other one is called solution, the other one is called post-processing. Pre-processing includes making the model, understanding what material to be done, and meshing it and applying boundary conditions. Once you keep, for example, I made a model of cantilever, I applied the force, I fixed here. So making this is called as pre-processing. Now I'm going to solve it by using the formula F equal to K into D. So that is called as solution. So now what kind of analysis, like am I going to use direct method or weighted residual method, or I'm going to variational method, all that comes under solution. Once solution is done, plotting the result is called as post-processing. So pre-processing, solution, post-processing. Every software has these three basic fundamentals. So now in programming, we always take the pre-processing in some different softwares and then do our analysis, means solution only in our MATLAB code. Okay, our MATLAB does solution and post-processing. And so now coming to almost the end of the slide. Okay, now what are the different types of analysis is there? So it's not that you blindly take some problem and solve it in whatever way you want and you get the result. No, it's not that way. There is some specific set of type of analysis. There is specific set of reasons why you should form the analysis given in this particular slide. Of course, once I share this slide, you can have a detailed look of it. If the problem is linear, then we have to go for static. If the problem is highly transient, actually I will take one more some time to understand what is a static and what is a transient. In all the static analysis, whatever you are seeing, the inertia is neglected. Inertia effect is neglected. All the problem of dynamic vibration analysis, the inertia effect is taken into consideration. So if the inertia of the problem is not important to you, you neglect it and follow static analysis. If inertia of the problem is very much important to you, then you have to follow this transient analysis. Now, what is this inertia? How to decide? I'll give one simple hint. It's that if the force is constant with the time, then inertia effects can be neglected. If the force is highly varying with the time, the inertia effect has to be assumed. And the more detailed analysis reasons we can meet in the other class and give you, but to keep short for this presentation, you assume that inertia effect is neglected, static, inertia effect is assumed, dynamic, and explicit dynamic, fatigue, thermal optimization, IN. There are so many of the analysis that can be done. By seeing the slides, you can able to get to know. And what are the softwares that are available to solve it? I will also show you. So these are so many other software that are available to solve these problems. So like commercially, we are using ANSYS. Okay, like this, these are for the design CAD software. So in our lab, we are using a SolidWorks for design, and then we are using ANSYS. Okay, so we use SolidWorks and ANSYS to solve all our industrial problems, and we also use COMSOL multiphysics. So as of now, I have the knowledge of ANSYS, Nastron, COMSOL, and then at least I know all these three softwares. And here I know AutoCAD, ProE, Unigraphics, CATIA. I worked on many softwares and Design Modeler. So among all the things, my favorites are like SolidWorks and ANSYS. So it's like after knowing many softwares, I come to a conclusion of SolidWorks is very good for mechanical problems and ANSYS is very good for structural. Okay, Abacus is also very good, but ANSYS is like preferable for me. So now let me show you some of the case studies that has been available on how to do these fundamental results. Sorry. So for example, like heat exchangers can be solved by FEM analysis that has been shown here. Okay, and then such kind of typical non-linear analysis can be done. You see, they have taken axis symmetric problem. These are three-dimensional. They convert into 2D axisymmetric problem and they solve the problems. So there's one way to show you that how 2D can be converted into a 3D. And then this is another long tube problem. And this particular slide is shown in this manner that, so even though there are so many components in the problem, whenever you want to do analysis, you only focus on that particular component in and around that, and where the input comes to it, where the output goes to it. So you don't have to model all the system to study this one pipe. You just focus from where this pipe gets input, from where the pipe goes output, only make that particular model in your ANSYS, neglecting all the unnecessary components which are very far and not influencing this pipe. That pipe only you make a model and do the simulations. Okay, so this particular thing is made to show you that you need not to model everything to study one pipe. You only model that pipe only which is going to show you or give you the results. So this is one part, practical knowledge. And then using FEM, you can also do a topology optimization. The optimization part I did not cover here, but in another fine day, I can also tell you how to perform a simple optimization techniques in ANSYS. So in industries, we always do topology optimizations. For example, in our unmanned air vehicle, we are always optimizing the cross section of the aerofoil. For example, we took a solid one, then we made holes in the aerofoil so that unnecessary material can be removed until minimum amount of material should remain in the aerofoil to have enough strength. So this removing unwanted material is called as topology optimization, and it's actually key in industries to reduce the weight and the material needed. Okay, so these are the very practical FEM topics I wanted to cover, and I believe I have given you a basic understanding of FEM rather than how to solve it, because my point is once you understand the fundamental FEM, you can able to solve any problem with a more practical approach. Okay, and if you have any queries or any assistance in your research, or if you want to contact me, you can always follow my mail ID. I am more happy to have my suggestions to you. Okay, thank you very much for the patience for my presentation.
Participants, if any doubts, you can please unmute yourself and you can pose a question.
Very good morning, sir.
Yes, please. Good morning.
Your presentations and your information on the subject was very helpful. Thank you, sir. And in your presentation, actually, you mentioned about the one PhD thing which you which you did. There you were explaining about the boundary conditions, and I had one particular doubt over there, sir.
Yes,
actually, there were free condition. The probable reason for that may be the circumferential layers, pressure vessel layers, which was there, might be highly elastic, no, sir. So there may be a condition where the incoming fluid, if it is carrying a higher pressure itself, may tend to rupture the elastic boundary. That may be the reason, scientific reason for considering free condition. It can exist, no, sir, because
yes,
actually only when the restriction may come into picture, when there is a blockage. But when there is no.
Yes, I agree. I understand. Yes. Can I answer? I understood your question completely. I understand.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Your question, you actually observed a very key point, which I did not cover in this presentation, but since you asked it, I'm going to cover this. See,
Yes, sir.
whenever you are doing any FEM simulations, right,
Yes, sir.
we always do the worst case scenario in the simulation. Okay.
Yes,
For
sir.
example, worst case scenario. We always do the worst case scenario. For example, if I'm designing my car and my
Mm.
car is standing on the road, it's absolutely safe, right? If the car is going at a slower speed, it is absolutely safe. If my car is going and crashing, then I want to know whether my car is safe or not, right? So in the simulations, I always focus on studying the worst case scenarios first as my first preference. So because if my design is safe in the worst case scenario, then my design is safe in all the scenarios. You agree?
In
Right?
that
So
particular case, yes, sir.
yeah, if my design is surviving the worst case scenario, then my design is safe in all the cases. Although I don't know, there's so much even that happened, like what the blood vessel I gave was happened in 2015, like 6 years before. I forgot many of the technical details, but since you asked this question, let me give some basic idea. And then see, for example, you want to know, for there is a vessel. Okay, sorry, assume this is the vessel. You want to know how much pressure this vessel can take, right? So if I want to know how much maximum pressure it can take before rupture, then it's better that I block one region and keep applying a pressure until it breaks. Because if this side is open, that is not a worst case scenario. When the worst case scenario will come, when one side is blocked. So when one side is blocked, then pressure is accumulated until the rupture occurs, right? So if I know at what pressure the rupture occurs, definitely that pressure I will not come when the both sides are open. Only when one side is closed, the rupture occurs. So that particular simulations, I don't know, I forgot it, but to keep it very short, to answer your query, so that person, maybe if you are trying to test for the worst case scenario and keeping both the ends open, then you are not actually simulating your worst case scenario. You agree?
That's okay, sir. That's correct. But the thing is, sir, in the actual practice, if you take a person who has got high blood pressure without blockage, in your case, when you say the worst case scenario, it is in the presence of partial blockage or worst blockage.
Yes.
But
Yes,
when
yes.
there is no blockage, but if a person is suffering from a high blood pressure,
Yeah.
that may affect the boundaries, no, sir.
Yes, yes,
Depending
agree.
on the,
I
since it is a very
completely.
thin membrane,
Yes.
very thin membrane. So elasticity may have a role over there, no, sir.
Yes, yes,
That means
completely.
here
Agree.
my thing is that condition can also exist, no, sir.
Yes, yes,
Where it is
whatever.
free and still the incoming fluid carrying higher pressure can affect the walls. That
Yes.
condition may also exist, no, sir.
Yes, what you are saying is correct. So now the one understanding you should get from your question only is that what kind of analysis we are going to do. So our boundary condition also should match that analysis, right? So if I want to only know when the blood is normally flowing into the blood vessel, I want to know how much dilation occurs in the blood vessel, then I'll keep both ends open and then I'll apply boundary condition accordingly.
Yes.
But if I want to know at what pressure my blood vessel rupture, then I have to take a worst case scenario boundary condition. So now the answer to your query is that boundary condition has to be selected in a suitable manner to study what we want to study. That's
yes,
it. If
sir.
boundary condition is matching to our intention, then problem is fine.
Yes,
if it is
sir.
not matching, then problem is not fine. This is the point what I wanted to make at that example. Okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. It was very informative. And one more thing, sir, like since you have used so many softwares, and I am being a researcher in the area of materials, especially the composites.
Yes.
I want to ask you your experience in this, sir. Maybe you may also be knowing, sir, composite materials undergo various different
we know. What do you
modes of
want to know in that? Tell me.
they undergo various modes of failure. But when people do analysis using these softwares, will that software take into picture those different type of failures? Because in manufacturing itself, there may be a lot of anisotropy. So I really I have a curiosity to know the results given by these softwares.
Okay. See, for example, when we are doing research, right, we never use softwares. We always do our own coding. Number one, why we are doing own coding? As you said, softwares are limited with respect to the amount of failure or amount of load it can take. But when you are doing research, we are actually doing something new in the scientific society, which is not covered in the existing commercial software. What is the commercial software? After doing a research and understanding a particular topic, that has been made into a commercial course, right? But when you're doing a research, you are trying to solve something unsolved one. So that unsolved one may not have exact codes in the softwares, right?
Exact
So,
behavior, yes, sir.
exact behavior might not be there. So this is a place where there is a called old wine in a new glass, or a new wine in the old glass. Okay, so if the existing code is good, but the method is, you can apply older method in a new problem, or a new method in a old problem, right? If the existing method is not applicable to solve your problems, then you have to develop your own methods and codes. You agree?
Yes, sir. Yes,
So,
sir. Yes, sir.
yeah, so that's how practically it has to be seen. So technically what I'm speaking, the commercial codes are not giving you more practical results. That's why we are having something called a factor of safety now to cover up our discrepancies in the simulations. Understand?
Yes, sir.
So this is
Yes,
how
sir.
we cover our mistakes actually.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, any other participants? Sir, okay, sir. I think there are no doubts.
Yes, sir.
Sir, Balaji sir, thank you very much for sparing your valuable time with us and enlightening us with the core of the subject. And I think participants also have enjoyed the today's session because a few people they are commenting that the lecture is very good and informative. So thank you very much, and we need the same cooperation in the future FDPs also.
Yes, sir. So thank you very much for your institute also for giving me opportunity to share my research. Always in every FDP, if you need my help, you're always free to invite me, sir. I'll always do my
Sure,
best.
sir. Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, participants, today we'll have the second session at 2 p.m. Right? So I'm going to end the session. Thank you.